Good evening and welcome again to our brand new program, Women to Women. I am Carol Paz, your hostess for the evening, and of course we have a very special guest. But before I introduce her, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Carpa Nevada LLC, importer of fine Portuguese olive oils, balsamic vinegar, and international teas. And to also thank our second sponsor, Villa Basque Deli and Cafe, home of Pete's famous chorizo. And now I'd like to turn our attention to our guest, Karen Pacini, for the evening. Karen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Karen is a young lady from Reno, and she has years of experience, and it's a pleasure, Karen, that you're coming in to not only share your personal background, where you grew up, who you grew up with, people that you knew, but also to share your professional background with us, and that's a surprise for the second half. So Karen, where do you hail from?
Arkansas.
Arkansas, home of several famous people. Did you ever know anybody famous out of Arkansas, like Bill Clinton?
Not personally.
Okay. Who did you know?
I knew my family. I lived there for 30 years, and so I knew quite a few people.
Johnny Cash is from there as well, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Okay. Did you have any familiarity with his family at all while you were growing up?
My mother used to ride the school bus with his brothers and sisters.
That should have been an interesting time. Did your mother have any memories of those days on the bus with Johnny Cash and his brothers and sisters?
Nothing specific that she told me, but...
I can't believe that he was that shy.
Probably not, but he was a little older than her, so...
Okay. Well, he went on to produce some really fine music, we know that.
Yes.
So in 30 years, you really are a native Arkansan.
Yes.
Where did
Arkansan.
Arkansan, thank you, Arkansan. Where did you go then from Arkansas?
Moved to Iowa and lived there for 4 or 5 years.
And would this have been during the time that you married and had children?
Yes, I was newlywed at the time.
All right. And how many children do you have?
I have 2 children. Now I have a stepson, so I have 3 boys.
3 boys, and that's a challenge. 3 daughters are a challenge, and a mixture is, it's a balancing act. But with 3 boys, I would imagine they provided lots of stories.
Lots of stories, lots of noise.
And what brought you out here to Nevada?
My husband got a job out here.
All right, and you hail now from the Reno area, I understand.
Yes.
All right, so when you came to Nevada, did you experience any kind of differences that you didn't deal with in Iowa or that you didn't deal with in Arkansas? How is Nevada different?
Nevada is my favorite place. It is, the climate's great. It's not too extreme one way or the other. The people are awesome.
Northern Nevada in particular has
Northern
that
Nevada,
beautiful
yes.
climate, yes.
Traffic's not too bad. I really like it here.
Well, I know that you're a mother, you're a wife, but you're also, I understand, a writer of sorts.
Yes.
And can you tell us, how did this artistic disposition, that artistic bend in you, where did it come from? Is it genetic in your family? Is it something that you've always had just special in your heart?
I've always been able to draw from the time I could hold a pencil, I guess. My mom is a musician, and she's played the piano my whole life, and she's a music director at her church, and my dad had a beautiful bass voice, and there was always singing and music in the house, and my mother always encouraged me in my art, and she didn't care if I wanted to paint on the bedroom walls. I was free to do that.
Oh.
I didn't take her up on that offer, and now I wish I had, but...
Did you go to school for art?
I went to school for art at Arkansas State University in Jonesboro, and I became a teacher. I never have taught art. Every time I moved a lot of times during my adult life. I've lived in 16 different places since college. And
wow.
As a teacher, that most elementary schools and even high schools, they may have one art teacher that goes over 2 or 3 different schools.
Yes.
And those teachers tend to get those positions and never leave until retirement. So I never lived in a place where there was an opening for me. So.
All right, so Karen, you have this gift of creativity in you, and you went to art school. Does your mind see colors? Does your mind see designs? Do you dream in colors? Do you dream in designs?
Absolutely.
Really?
When I was younger, we had a kiosk. This was a fad thing where you would put paint on sweatshirts and then it would spin the designs and the colors would sling. So I dreamed this girl, and we did the paint like this for the hair, and when it spun, it looked exactly like a spiral perm. So I ran to the store one day and I did one of those, and we hung it up, and we sold more of those than anything else. It was called the Dream Girl shirt, and guys would come up and say, "My girlfriend has blonde hair, can you make one in blonde?" And they never wanted to make their own, so I made lots of those.
Well, in past conversations with you, I've understood that decorating was something that you thought that's where you would take your talents, that's where you would eventually wind up, but that proved to be not true.
Not true because, well, two things, I guess. When I was in, I believe, the 6th grade, I had a notebook and I had stuck all these pictures of furniture, lamps, rugs, and all these things, but they were in sections based on the styles.
Yes.
And I ran out of styles, so I had a cowgirl room, and it had steer horns on the wall, and I had a friend who teased me mercilessly about that. But also I didn't go into it because I thought it was so much fun. Who would pay someone to do that? So I ended up not doing it.
Do you still have that feeling that if you enjoy what you're doing, most people won't hire you? See, that's one of the difficulties. As a teacher, I'm passionate about what I teach. I want my kids to love the classroom, to love to learn, and to think about situations that they're going to have to make decisions on in that classroom. So I can imagine going to a job that was dull, uninteresting, and never required anything from me. But I know there are people that do that.
I've done that a lot of years.
Well, how did you get back then to the roots of your creativity?
I had the story that kept going through my head, and it just wouldn't let up. And so one day I sat down and wrote it out. And I actually typed all night. And from that point on, I loved it. It was like building something, and it was creative to interweave storylines and make it all come together in the end.
It's like eating complements of food that go well together, and you just don't know, should I start here? Should I start with this? I like them all. Perhaps the analogy to food is not the best one that I can think of right now, but there is a hunger to an artist that has to be fed.
There is. When you're working in an office and you're doing someone else's desk work, and you can get it all done in 30 minutes, and you have to sit there the rest of the day, and your mind is thinking, I could do this and that and the other. It drives you crazy. And for me to not be able to create, to spend all my time doing something else like that, it's like a drug addict needing a fix. I can't go too long without doing something creative.
Have you ever written something that you've kept back from publication, that you're thinking about publishing, but it hasn't arrived at that point yet?
Yes. And it was actually the first book that I wrote, and it's for young people the first year, that they move out of their parents' home. And there's so many kids that I've seen watching my own children grow up that they don't know how to do too many things that are really important to existence. And things like how to iron pleated pants and a shirt for an interview, or how to make a basic meal other than a frozen pizza. How to pick produce so you get the fresh stuff, how to balance your checkbook, all these kinds of things that kids need to know. And with two working parents, they don't always know all those things.
Can you give an example where you might have seen a young person want to do the right thing but completely blew it, and you had to take it back and say, this is unacceptable?
Yes.
Really?
We had a duplex that we rented to college kids.
Yes.
And these college boys wrote their rent check in pencil. So I took it back to them and I said, look, you can't do this because someone unethical could erase it
Sure.
clean out your account.
Sure.
So-
I can remember, and I'm sure that you can too, going back, whether I was graduating from high school, I was working. I had a job, and my father set up a checking account, a savings account, and he wanted me to learn during those 2 years as a junior and senior in high school in preparation for college. So I kind of had a problem keeping a balance. I mean, there was one, but I blew it. And then my father had said to me, Carol, if you ever write a check and there's not sufficient funds in there, do you think you deserve to have a checking account? And he was really right, and that stayed with me. So when I went to college, I practiced, okay, I had my checkbook. And I remember the comments of my father, how embarrassing it is to have a check bounce because he was director of the bank. And I didn't want to do that. But there were I didn't know how to iron. I didn't know how to get stains out of special clothing. So I can think that this book, does it have a title?
Not yet.
Not yet. But it's something that you think individuals, young people, male or female, could make use of.
Yes.
Well, I might invite my viewing audience before we take a break here to maybe think about sending in a title to Karen, and her email and her writing name that she writes under it will come up in our second half. So we'll be back shortly.
This episode of Women to Women is brought to you by Carpa Nevada LLC and Villa Basque Deli and Cafe.
Are you looking for a healthier lifestyle? A more nutritious diet? Do you care about quality? If your answer is yes, or if you are just curious, come into Villa Basque Deli and Cafe right here in Carson City, Nevada. Discover fine Portuguese extra virgin olive oils, vintage balsamic vinegars, and a wide assortment of international health teas provided by distributor Carpa Nevada LLC. In addition to these terrific items, Villa Basque is also the home of Pete's famous Basque chorizo, handmade on the premises from Pete's secret family recipe. Satisfy your culinary curiosities. Don't delay.
Welcome back to the second half of Women to Women. I'm here with Karen Pacini, who is a very creative person, not only as a decorator, but as a musician and also as a writer. And we are just discussing Karen's unpublished book, untitled book, for 18, 19, 20-year-olds who have left home for the first time and have discovered that there are things that they should have been taught, but weren't taught for whatever reasons. And Karen has a literary name, Karina with a K, Russell. And you may send those ideas, perhaps for a title for such a book, to Karen at her website or at her email address. So Karen, getting back, this unpublished book, sometimes there's a dilemma for authors as to which publishing company to offer your ideas, literary ideas to. Is it difficult to find publishers these days?
It's difficult to get your foot in the door. It's easy to find publishers, and you can look in the genre that you're writing in. There's a big, thick book, The Writer's Market, that tells you all of that.
Why is it so difficult to get your foot in the door? It seems that we have an abundance of creative ideas, people who can organize those ideas, put them out on paper, which would interest millions of future writers. Why are publishers tough people to deal with?
I think part of the reason is the ebook explosion, and so many people are going to ebooks because it is hard to get into publishers. And I believe publishers are very, very choosy because of the economy and everything. So they choose the certain
name or author
books that they know will be a sure thing. And so for new authors, it's hard to get your foot in the door.
Is there any kind of notoriety or any kind of infamous title that you need to get your foot in the door to? Do you have to be a well-known person or not?
That does help, but I don't think you have to have an infamous title. And many times writers come up with their own title, and then the publisher will change it to something they think is more marketable.
Okay. Now, I also know from past conversations that you've had this idea that you've wanted to introduce into Nevada schools. That means the state of Nevada, right?
Yes.
What kind of an idea is this?
Well, I wrote a play, and it's American history, and there are a lot of different events that happened in our early years as a country that used to be taught in schools, and they're not anymore for whatever reason, but some of these stories are miraculous. They're so exciting. They would really make a difference for kids to know this. And so I'm working with a group called PACT, which is Project Americans Coming Together.
Yes.
And so the play is about several different incidences. They're not connected, but they're just miraculous things that happened.
During what historical period of America?
From the French and Indian War through to when the Constitution went into effect.
Where did you first develop this idea? You say in American classrooms, and for our purpose here in Nevada, some of what our children used to learn is no longer being shared in the classroom. And as you say, there can be various reasons for that. But our children are being kept from a part of their very important history, whether it's East Coast history, Midwest, Western history. And you would like to see that come back into force.
I would like to see these stories out there, and I think kids learn just like everybody else by seeing or doing or reading, and it depends on the individual. So this is another way to get these stories out there to them, so when they see them or they act them out, they're going to remember those stories.
All right, so you have the play written.
Yes.
Who are you introducing the play to in particular?
To fifth graders in the Nevada public schools, because that's when American history is taught.
And where have you introduced this play so far?
It's been introduced in a couple of schools here in Carson City. It has not been performed yet. I believe the first performance will be in May.
All right. We'll keep track of that. Now, what kind of a reception did you get when you brought this play forth to administrators or to teachers? Was there a good support system for it? Were they interested in carrying it into their classrooms?
Teachers more so than administrators, but
all right.
They've introduced it to quite a few teachers, and they have been very interested.
If you want to bring an example of a story that captures the attention of fifth graders who are 11-year-olds for the most part. Some of them are 10, some of them might be a little bit 10 years and some months. But what kind of a story do you share with them that you see their eyes brighten up? They perk up, they said, oh, really? Did that happen?
I would say for kids, it was the Emily Geiger story.
Would you share that with us?
Yes. Emily was a teenager from South Carolina during the Revolutionary War, and her father was disabled, so he could not go and fight. And Emily overheard him speaking to a neighbor that one of the American generals, General Greene, needed someone to carry a message to General Sumter. So she volunteered, and they had had no one else come forward to do this except this little teenage girl. And so General Greene was reluctant to let her go, but he had no other option. And he needed to get the message soon. So he agreed, and she would have to travel on horseback 100 miles through woods that were filled with British soldiers. So it was very dangerous. So she took out on horseback, and she rode all that day and into the night and stopped at a house to ask directions. And the woman at the house asked her in and gave her food and offered her a bed for the night, and she accepted. But during the night, she heard British voices knocking on the door and asking for the female spy who had come this way. So she slipped out the window upstairs.
Okay.
And got on her horse and rode off into the night. And the next morning, she was captured by British soldiers who took her to Lord Rawdon, and she was questioned, and they didn't like her answers. So they told the soldiers to put her in the guardhouse and call for a matron to come and search her. So they locked her up, and when the soldiers left, before the matron came, she pulled out the message and memorized it, and then she ate it. and she was chewing the last bits when the matron came to search her. So she pretended she was crying and covered up her face while she swallowed the last piece.
Oh my.
And then the matron searched her and found nothing, so they let her go. And she delivered the message to General Sumter. And because of that, General Sumter was able to connect with General Greene, and they defeated Lord Rawdon in a battle. Lord Rawdon was supposed to meet Cornwallis at Yorktown, and so Cornwallis was on his own against George Washington. George Washington won that battle. It was the last major battle of the Revolutionary War. And
what a story. What a story. And you know, as a former 5th grade teacher, I can just see taking a true event and mesmerizing with your voice and with the passion that you have in sharing a story like that, and asking 5th graders in my classroom, can you think of a time when you did something that was courageous, that you weren't sure whether it was going to be successful, if something could happen to you, but you felt so important, you felt so responsible to do it, that you risk part of your safety, maybe your entire safety, in order to help somebody else that was counting on you. And I'm always amazed at first one little hand and then another hand will go up, and as you bring them into that story that you shared with them, you set the road. You open the road up for future reading, for future exploration of new characters. Some of them can be unknown, like Emily was, or some of them can be well-known, like George Washington or Lord Cornwallis. So that's quite an endeavor, to put history back into the classroom and to get kids interested enough to capture their imaginations and their energies
And
to go
how-
research.
How many of us have felt like, I can't make a difference, I'm just one person?
We can. And what an opportunity to let each child at that 5th grade level, and they radiate that out to their family and to their other friends, of you have abilities inside of you. You have talents. You have gifts that you've been given. And sometimes we're afraid, even as kids, and certainly as adults, to take that step forward because we're afraid of failing, or we're afraid of being ridiculed. We are afraid that it will cost too much. We are afraid that nobody will like. And we have to kind of help our children understand it's not about us all the time. It's not about self. It's about, can I make a difference for other people and their lives? So I really applaud you for taking this idea, introducing it back into schools, and the support is working for you. The support is there. Well, let me ask you, have you ever had a book published?
I have one book published. It is published on Amazon as an ebook.
And what is the name of that book?
It's called The List Maker.
And without giving away the ending, how did the list maker develop in your mind? Is it part you? Is it all fantasy? Is it all fiction?
The story is all fiction. There's a part of me in there because the character has some really horrible things happen to her in the beginning, and it's how she pulls out of this dilemma and how she heals from a lot of hurt that she has. And so the hurt and the healing comes through an historic home that she restores. And there's a lot of art, there's decorating, there's a lot of
Karen in it.
a lot of Karen in that. And then other people come into her life, and it ends well.
You know, can you think of anything more giving than to share sometimes the pains, the disappointments, the challenges that just seem like they're going to engulf us, that we'll never see the light at the end of the tunnel, but persevering and being able to share later on after you're going through the healing, or you have been healed, and you now know that this is not just unique to you, it's unique to all people. And when we are willing to share what some of those challenges have been, what some of those hurts and disappointments have been, but we also have the end of the story, the healing process, and the gift of the future that comes back to you again. How important that is for each one of us to take the time to remember that and to do it, to do it in our life.
Because when you're in the middle of terrible things, it seems like it will never end, but it will.
It will. And if I can ask you, Karen, without going into specifics unless you choose to do so, what are some of those lessons that to this point in your life, from disappointments or from hurts from wounds that you have received, what have you learned? What have you learned from some of those challenges? There are other women who are listening out there. They may be 86, they may be 26, they may be 46, but they're dealing with some very important issues, and sometimes they deal with children. They can deal with boys. They can deal with a husband's death. They can deal with poverty, homelessness. They can deal with anxiety and worries about how to pay the bills. What lessons have you taken away from some of the challenges that you and your family have faced?
I would say my faith is number one. And, a prayer and a bubble bath goes a long way to help you through things. And also, sleeping on problems, you have a better perspective the next day after.
Isn't that true? What a good thing to be able to say to yourself.
Yes.
Karen, Carol, there's nothing more that you can do about it tonight. But if you go to bed and you rest that body and that brain, when you get up in the morning, God is so good to give you a new door to look through, a new perspective. And when I've had my breakfast, I've had my cup of coffee, I've had rest, I've got energy to deal with it. And I do deal with it. All right, so your faith was very important. What else have you learned?
I've learned that things aren't forever. It may seem like it, but it will end. Things will get better.
Have other people in your life been able to give you an open door by just sitting down? Good listeners, people that you can have confidence in. They are confidential, and they will just listen. They don't necessarily have to say anything. Are those important comforters along the way?
Absolutely. I was married 17 and a half years and then divorced, and I didn't realize until my divorce how important girlfriends are. They really hold you up when you can't stand up by yourself, and that was a big thing. And to newlyweds who, naturally you want to spend all the time with your new spouse, don't neglect your friends. You need those friends.
Often friends, I think of, are the ways that God shows us that He loves us, through friendships. Well, Karen, we want to thank you for being an example of not giving up. We want to thank you for being an example of a mover 16 different times in your life. That takes courage, and that takes determination. And you must have a very positive attitude about you that says, okay, boys, we're on the move again, but it's going to be an adventure.
Adventure, that's what I call it.
Okay, and it can be a positive, never a negative in your life. So we thank you so much for coming to Women and to share your background. We will look forward to what happens with the Nevada schools on your new play. Does your new play have a name of any sort?
It's called Foundation of a Nation, which comes from a line in a letter that John Adams wrote to his wife Abigail. They were separated a good part of the time during their marriage because of his work, and he said to her, the work that we do, in this work we lay the foundation of a nation. So that's where the title comes from.
Thank you for sharing that. And with this program, Women to Women, we hope we are laying a foundation for other women, not only to hear and listen to, but to take hope from. So we thank you, and until the next time we meet, we thank our sponsors, Carpenter Nevada LLC and Villa Basque, Deli and Cafe, home of Pete's famous chorizo. Until the next time we meet, have a good evening.